Videos like these are made possible by viewers like you, who support the channel through Patreon, channel memberships, and stream donations. And don't forget to check out the Bad Weapon Rehabilitation servers at www.badweaponrehab.tf. Check the links in the description for more information, and let's get into the video.
In this video, I simulated a dinosaur ecosystem for 100 days in hardcore Minecraft and— Sorry, I'm not keeping up that bit the whole time. I probably scared off a few people already who aren't totally brain rotted and content pilled. Oops. Anyway, yeah, those videos where people simulate some kind of ecosystem like a desert or a rainforest in some kind of terrarium, or people simulating an ecosystem in this very game seem to be very popular. And hey, the Jurassic Park franchise has had plenty of examples of showing dinosaurs living in a big ecosystem together. Even if the most recent movie has decided to dramatically limit that for the rest of this franchise's future, so that's awesome. So when I made a poll about what Jurassic World Evolution 2 challenge run to do next, I shouldn't have been surprised that the mega ecosystem won out. But what did surprise me is what an absolute nightmare this challenge was to complete. Okay, so the captures only run, not that bad. A lot of the struggles I had there were due to my own ineptitude and lack of knowledge on the game's mechanics, despite my many hours in it. The black market run, pretty easy. I managed to beat that one first try in a single sitting. This run though, oh my god, I lost count of how many times I tried and failed with this challenge. A lot of runs failed basically right out of the gate because I just ran out of money at the start, but the most frustrating was when I'd make it a decent way through, only to hit a bottleneck and have to start over. I tried over and over again on so many different maps. Pennsylvania was an awful choice because of the tornadoes that will just destroy you. Isla Sorna was no good for similar reasons. The storms there injure your dinosaurs, meaning I'm constantly swapping them back in and out of the paleomedical facility, and tranquilizing dinosaurs in this challenge to transfer them is far from easy, as you'll soon see. I was downright stumped on how to beat this one for ages. But then I tried the Biosyn map, the same one where I made my Mega Park. This worked out better, but I once again hit a bottleneck where I just couldn't keep up with the rate of dinosaur death. And this wasn't just due to old age. Look at this. This right here was my breaking point. This Utyrannus kills a Casmosaurus in a fight, and then it immediately runs off to go kill a Parasaurolophus like it didn't just make itself a meal right then and there. And trust me, this happens whether or not you take away the carcass. Not to mention, as I am the god of this land, I see now the mistake that was free will, as social dinosaurs will very frequently wander away from their buddies, get lonely, get pissed off because of that, and decide the best course of action is to bash their skull against my fences until they break through and murder everyone. Or they'll wander into the territory of a species they do not get along with and fight them to the death. So I'm constantly having to transfer them and heal them from their injuries. It's just a pain in the ass on top of having to deal with the classic Jurassic World Evolution death spiral you get once a run goes on for long enough. This challenge in particular has made me so anxious for JW3. I am 100% on board with baby dinosaurs if it makes this challenge easier in the next game. But ultimately, I decided on a course of action that may be controversial for this series. I had to lower the difficulty to hard instead of Jurassic, and turn off storms entirely if I wanted to get this video out within the year. Don't believe me? I started this challenge in April. I've already got enough video projects on the back burner that I can't afford to have this one clogging up my hard drive space too. If you can beat this challenge on Jurassic difficulty with storms on, show me. I want to see how it's done without cheesing the challenge completely, but just trapping everything dangerous with rocks and planters. So with all that preamble out of the way, let's finally find out if I can get 5 stars in Jurassic World Evolution 2 by simulating a giant ecosystem. The first step was actually creating the ecosystem, and I wanted to create some obvious distinct biomes that each species would hopefully stick to, or I could at least see how they might migrate from one area to another. All without barriers, so no rock formations to keep predators contained or anything like that. So I gave myself the max starting cash so I could terraform as much as I wanted and create these biomes. The amount I ended up with wasn't the lowest money count you start off with, but it's close enough to the second lowest. I've lost too many runs of going bankrupt right at the start of the game for me to care at this point. I end up creating 6 distinct biomes across the park. Our starting area is the forest because the entire map is already a forest, so that's the easiest to start off with. Next to it, we have the desert, and making sure that these two areas are separate and distinct will be very important, as you'll soon see. Right below the desert, we have the grasslands. I know grass only showed up late into the Mesozoic, but I'm working with a limited brush tool here, and one of those brushes is the gross-ass lumpy grass, so cut me a bit of slack. After that, the swamps, littered with water and all kinds of different plants. We're mostly going to be having herbivores this time around, which should come as no surprise, so having plenty of different kinds of plants is very important. But trust me when I say these herbivores aren't all going to be gentle giants. And then we have the most remote region, the mountains, way off in the corner of the map. The 6th biome is something we'll be saving for later, but for now it's going to be sectioned off so no one wanders into it. It'll just make everyone's lives easier in the long run. In any case, with our biomes ready to go, we can get started on our first and most important guest section. Because most of the map is going to be dedicated to the dinosaur's habitat, the guests will need to be confined to isolated sections of the map, so it's kind of like they're the ones that are in cages instead of the dinosaurs. If you've ever worked for Amazon, you should understand this process very intimately. One thing that caught my attention with the Biosyn map was the Hyperloop system, and the fact that it could be used to ensure I had a good appeal rating the entire time by using these remote viewing outposts to cover my whole park and viewing opportunities. However, this would end up being a double-edged sword, but we'll get there when we get there. For now, I get all the necessities in and begin working on getting our first dinosaurs. For the first time in one of these challenges, we can actually synthesize our own dinosaurs from scratch, and as a result, my number one priority is giving everyone possible the long-lived trait to stave off the death spiral for as long as humanly possible. And that usually means getting a species up to 100% genome so I can guarantee that trait. Unfortunately, for some species, it's not going to make all that much of a difference, and there's some dinosaurs with particularly short lifespans that I need to replace with a relative degree of frequency, as is the case with our first dinosaur, Dryosaurus. Everyone seemed to like the species breakdowns in the last video, but I wasn't sure what to do about repeat species. So for this video I'll try and come up with new facts, but don't be surprised if in future videos there end up being repeats. I think there's more small Asian stegosaurs in this game than there are interesting facts about them, and I'm sure for some new viewers it'll be their first time seeing these profiles. Just so you know, I did try my hardest to mostly use species that I did not use in the previous park. Anyway, Dryosaurus is a small ornithopod dinosaur from late Jurassic North America, of which there are two known species, Altus and Elderae. One thing that's notable about Dryosaurus is the frequency at which its fossils are found as juveniles, with one particular dig site in Colorado being a source of a multitude of specimens that range from juveniles to even embryonic fossils, something that's incredibly rare to find. The presence of eggshells also suggests that this may have been a nesting ground, probably one that was destroyed by a flood, as the environment that Dryosaurus lived in was prone to dramatic seasonal changes. This could also suggest that they were communal animals, which makes sense as without any real forms of defense, there is safety in numbers, something that my park's Dryosaurus population is sure to find out the hard way. The issue with this particular batch of Dryosaurus is that, for one thing, not all of them even have the long-lived trait since I didn't have enough DNA to give them more trait slots, and for another thing, even with the long-lived trait, they tend to die off fairly quickly, and they were probably the species that had to replace the most throughout this whole challenge. As cute as they are, don't get too attached. Oh. Like the caged animals they are, I make sure to supply my guests with food, drinks, and enrichment, and send some teams out for my next species which will get along just fine with the Dryosaurus. I am currently running this park at a massive loss, and I need a species with a bit more ooh and ah factor to actually start bringing the money in. Dryosaurus is cute and all, but I don't know how many people would be willing to fly out to the middle of the Italian Alps just to see it and eat some overpriced donuts. Imagine going all the way out to a huge safari park in a remote location, and when you get there, it's an enormous enclosure with like 6 gazelles and that's it. I don't know, even if the gazelles were an extinct species, I'd feel at least a bit ripped off. A contract I've taken on asked me to keep my dinosaurs disease-free for 5 minutes, but the counter is noticeably staying put, which means I have to go even deeper into the red to get a ranger station and medical facility set up and running to see what's wrong with my Dryosaurus. It's thankfully nothing too serious, but I still need to get it fixed as soon as I can. Sick dinosaurs are bad for ratings and all that. That contract goes through at just the right time as I'm in the process of cooking up our next batch of dinosaurs. A group of Chasmosaurus who I forgot to edit the skins on so they all look exactly the same. Oh well, welcome to the park. Green gang? Unsurprisingly, Chasmosaurus is a Chasmosaurine ceratopsian, the one for which the group was named. Its name means opening or hollow lizard in reference to the large fenestrae in its frill, a large square-shaped structure likely used for display and species identification purposes, since it was too thin and fragile to be used for self-defense. Those fenestrae were likely used to make the structure much lighter so it could be larger and more eye-catching, not so it could be used as a larger shield. Since Chasmosaurus shared its environment with other ceratopsian species, being able to tell each other apart at a distance would have been very beneficial, especially for mating purposes. Despite being a ceratopsian, a group known and named for their horns, Chasmosaurus has rather short and stubby horns, which calls into question their use in both defensive and combative situations, or even as display structures themselves. In terms of the Jurassic World Evolution games, this was actually the first ever non-film canon species to be revealed for the first game. Oh my god, that was 7 years ago. Well, the introduction of dinosaurs that look like dinosaurs and not like overgrown car insurance salesmen has proven to be extremely popular with my guests. And after the construction of a hotel, our park has finally reached a point of profitability. One of my Chasmosaurus immediately gets sick 1 minute after existing, and there's clearly something schnasty in the water I placed down because it's immediately got a bad case of rabies. Thankfully, rabies is actually one of the easier diseases in the game that you have to follow specific conditions to get a cure for. You just have to do it quickly before the rabies escalates and the dinosaur starts to go all brain crazy. He was getting a little antsy with the fence, which I had to take care of, but the issue is thankfully resolved without incident. I can also stop stressing about refilling my emergency generator every couple of minutes as I place down a power plant, though even if power is no longer a concern, space soon will be in this tiny little guest area. Once that's done, I set up some viewing platforms in the desert since I'm about to get my next batch of species in there. I'm gonna want the next species to be in a separate area from the Chasmosaurus since they're not gonna like each other. So I airlift our new boys out of the hatchery and we welcome in our new herd of Kentrosaurus. Kentrosaurus is a relatively small stegosaur from late Jurassic Africa, specifically in the Tendaguru beds of Tanzania. Unlike Stegosaurus, who had the rows of plates running all the way down its back until the tips of its tail, Kentrosaurus had back plates which transitioned into rows of large spines as they went further down its back, along with 2 spines coming out of its shoulder blades, giving it the appropriate name of prickle lizard. It's one of the most well-known dinosaurs from its formation, with many other species being either extremely fragmentary, poorly studied, or both. Seriously, look at the list of theropods. The only one known for more than a couple of leg bones, vertebrae, and teeth is Elaphrosaurus. Tale as old as time for African species, unfortunately. Thank God for the Spinosaurus neotype. The Kentrosaurus are apparently no more resilient to disease than my rabid Chasmosaurus, as we get yet another tuberculosis outbreak. I swear, rabies used to be the big oh shit disease back in JPOG, but in this game, it's tuberculosis all the way. It kills your dinosaurs so fast and spreads like crazy. But it's nothing that my crackshot aim can't fix, so I managed to contain the outbreak. Also, ignore the guest protests. Some employee got gored by a Kentrosaurus when I was releasing them, and hey, I'm not made of money over here. While I'm getting over the lower attendance, at the very least, it seems like the Kentrosaurus are doing well in their new home. They've taken to the desert quite nicely. As I'm cooking up some more Dryosaurus, I do get a notification for wild Struthiomimus out in the world. I left that feature on since some of the research and dig site costs in challenge mode can be especially prohibitive, and it's my best chance of seeing certain species, on top of being a minor convenience every now and then. I do have it set to the lowest frequency setting, so we're gonna have to do the heavy lifting in terms of populating the park with dinosaurs. Trust me. And that's exactly what we do as we release our next batch of Dryosaurus, and airlift in the Struthiomimus, who I think will get along well with the Kentrosaurus in the desert. I made a joke in Struthiomimus' last appearance about being portrayed as an egg eater in one of the Land Before Time movies, but goofy ass song and Pinky and the brain dynamic aside, seriously, the dumb one is even voiced by Rob Paulson doing basically the exact same voice. This isn't too far off from a lot of older depictions of Struthiomimus and its relatives. I remember plenty of old dinosaur books and Phil Tippett's famous stop motion animation portraying the dinosaur as an egg thief. This is a stereotype ascribed to a lot of the smaller toothless theropods, with the idea being that their beaks were used for cracking open eggshells. It took a while for the idea of herbivorous or even omnivorous theropods to really start catching on. Of course, the reality is that basically any animal, herbivore or carnivore, will eat eggs when given the chance, as they're generally incapable of fighting back and highly rich in nutrients. And Struthiomimus was likely a lot closer to our modern-day ground-dwelling birds than it was to an obligate egg eater. We can't prove it didn't sing about them though. With more dinosaurs in the park, it's getting to the point where I really need to start thinking about every inch of space inside of these guest areas. And the guests need to think about it too. There's not much room on the pass, and this will be a persistent problem throughout this challenge, but I managed to mitigate it for now with the addition of another viewing gallery. As for the dinosaurs themselves, it seems like they're all sticking around the areas they were introduced to for now. Makes sense, as they probably don't see the need to go anywhere else, but boy will that soon change. Struthiomimus isn't the only returning species from the previous challenge. We've got a herd of Muttaburrasaurus to catch too, as I wait for the fossils from my last few digs to cook up. Luckily, Muttaburrasaurus has a quite long natural lifespan, so even though these are wild caught and don't have the long live trait, these guys will still be around for a good long while, and I won't have to worry about replacing them until I start adding predators to the ecosystem. As I'm waiting on the new captures though, my Struthiomimus gets sick with avian pox, which is such an annoying disease. The only way to research a cure is to quarantine the dinosaurs suffering from the disease, which kinda goes against this entire challenge, but unless I want everyone to die slowly as I run out of money, I kinda just have to set up a tiny little cage for them to stay in for a couple of seconds just so I can research the treatment. I don't mind there being conditions that need to be met to research disease treatments, but this one has to be the most tedious. I start working on getting the 6 dinosaurs quarantined as the Muttaburrasaurus finally arrive, and hopefully they won't end up getting sick themselves. Muttaburrasaurus was a raptidontomorph dinosaur that lived in the Albian stages of the Cretaceous, which means it lived right around the middle of the Cretaceous period. You'd think this would mean it lives in the middle Cretaceous, but nope, that would be too easy. During this point in Earth's history, Australia, where Muttaburrasaurus lived, and Antarctica were actually likely still connected to each other as one larger landmass. The southern continents of the world were all breaking apart from a larger landmass known as Gondwana, and they're characterized primarily by being kind of weird and having species that existed, and in some cases survived, nowhere else on Earth, such as one of Muttaburrasaurus' contemporaries, the giant amphibian Colosseum, the last of its kind, which were previously thought to have gone extinct at the end of the Paleozoic. And yet they found a home halfway through the Cretaceous in the neighborhood of this big-nosed goofball. I've chosen to put the Muttaburrasaurus in the desert as they eat the same kind of food as the Kentrosaurus, and I want to give the desert area a bit more to look at for the guests to attract them over to it, as the forest has most of their attention right now. It's going to have even more attention soon. Another reason I chose to put them in the desert is because I didn't want to overcrowd the forest when I'm about to fill it up with a huge flock of yet another new species. But before I can do that, I have to put a stop to the avian pox outbreak now that I have the treatment for it. And thankfully, I can immediately research the vaccine for it so I won't have to deal with it again afterwards. Before I can even incubate the new species, I do need a bit of extra cash, so I grab a nice looking picture of some of the desert species and also that cactus I'm about to crash into. Ouch. But it's all worth it in the end, since once I cook up this nice big flock of Gallimimus, not only do we get a new species in our park, but we also get a nice fat paycheck for it too. That's what it's all about, baby. Oh, and the dinosaurs, I guess, they're alright too. While the name Chicken Mimic at least does a good job at drawing attention to the connection between birds and dinosaurs, it really does a disservice to how massive Gallimimus really was. This was a 20-foot long animal that would have looked down on all but the absolute tallest of humans. I would have called this thing like Gigastruthios or something. It absolutely dwarfed its North American cousins and is currently the largest known ornithomimid, but not the largest known ornithomimosaur. There is a distinction, and it's a weird one. Thin plate-like structures in the beak of Gallimimus have suggested that it likely specialized in eating tough plant matter, and like other ornithomimids, it was likely an omnivore. Obligate herbivory is more or less a myth after all, but despite its large size, Gallimimus probably wouldn't view you as a food source, but I would still avoid pissing it off. Regular ostriches are dangerous enough. Every new species we get is a big deal, since it means we're creeping closer to our required goal for finishing this park, which I've set at 25 species coexisting together in this ecosystem. If that sounds like a lot, that's because believe me, it will be, but it'll actually end up being even more than that. You'll see what I mean. At this point, I'm just trying to break the financial threshold for the park to reach its first star, but with so little space to work with, there is only so much I can do. Path crowding is a big problem, but I paradoxically can't fix that problem to improve my park rating without improving my park rating to unlock wider paths. A viscous circle. However, extremely conveniently, a suspicious third party offers me extra money in terms of ticket prices, which count towards my star rating, and after getting some Struthiomimus delivered in, that clears the star threshold. Thanks, suspicious subsidy organization. Since I'm playing on hard difficulty and not Jurassic difficulty, I can now get carnivore feeders at 1 star instead of 2, making carnivores an actually viable option for me now. With a few new upgrades to the guest area, the money is pouring in. Just widening the paths and adding a new amenity brings us a third of the way to our next star, and requires that I build a new hotel for guest accommodations. I even go so far as to begin construction on the second guest area out in the desert, since things are still crowded over at the main area. I end up connecting the two areas with a tour route that even cuts through a bit of the grasslands. Not that there's anything there yet, but give it time. But now it's time to introduce a predator. Well, technically. I'm not confident enough in my abilities to produce dinosaurs quickly enough to accommodate a predatory dinosaur's hunger needs, but I can definitely produce a pack of scavengers that will get along fine with just about every herbivore in the game. They're not exactly going to strike terror into the hearts of even our Struthiomimus, but our new pack of Coelophysis still has an important role to play in this ecosystem. Coelophysis was a small carnivore, only being about 10 feet long, and it's one of the most well-known and studied dinosaurs of the entire Triassic period, with massive bone beds being found in Ghost Ranch, badass dig site name by the way, consisting of hundreds, if not thousands of animals and several fully articulated skeletons. Also, apparently a bunch of movies were filmed out at Ghost Ranch, like Oppenheimer, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Wild Wild West, The Lone Ranger. Hey, Oppenheimer though. As well as being one of the earliest known dinosaurs, Coelophysis has had its fair share of contention. One discovery that really put it on the map involved stomach contents that initially gave Coelophysis the distinction of being a cannibalistic dinosaur long before Majungasaurus came to take that spotlight. But it turns out these were unrelated reptiles being misinterpreted as juvenile Coelophysis. Really though, almost all carnivorous animals engage in cannibalism, so Coelophysis was likely no different. There's just no fossil evidence of it, yet. The Coelophysis seem to be acclimating to their new environment well, though it seems they could use a little bit more forest covering, which I provide for them around their little oasis. But at the very least, everyone seems to be getting along just fine in their respective habitats. Everyone in the forest is chill, and the desert is downright packed at this point. Even the guests are happier in their habitats now that I've upgraded their amenities more. Though as I say that, it seems like something's wrong with one of my Gallimimus. He's at low health and bashing his tiny little head against the fences. It turns out it's rabies again, and that leaves me feeling very thankful that this wasn't something more dangerous for how late I ended up catching this. One of the Chasmosaurus getting that would have been really bad. But now it was time to introduce a predator. Of like lizards and little frogs and shit. There's some Compsognathus out in the wild that are available to catch, and I figure I may as well add a scavenger to the forest too. Before they arrive though, one of the Muttaburrasaurus starts panicking for basically no reason, and sprints all the way from the desert to the forest in one go. So yeah, if you ever see a dinosaur that's well outside of the habitat they started in, that's probably why. The same thing happens like a minute later with this Dryosaurus that's decided it's much happier in the desert. It'll happen a lot more than this, trust me. But in any case, it's time to get our next species and transfer in the Compsognathus. See, this one I would call a chicken mimic. That's way more fitting. Look how tiny it is. This diminutive carnivore has had quite the history in the Jurassic Park franchise. Or at least it sort of has. See, in the original novel, which the Lost World movie adapts pretty much all of its Compsognathus screen time from, Procompsognathus was actually the genus used. And in the Lost World where it's first introduced on film, it's referred to as Compsognathus triassicus, with triassicus being the species epithet for Procompsognathus. Confused yet? Well, don't worry, because Procompsognathus isn't even all that closely related to Compsognathus in the first place. The former is a Coelophysid from the late Triassic, and the later is, would you guess it, a Compsognathid from the late Jurassic. At about 3 feet long, this is just about as big as Compsognathids got, but considering these guys lived isolated on small island chains in what would one day become Europe, it's likely as big as they needed to get. I try to tranquilize that lonely Dryosaurus so I can transfer it back to its buddies, but then a mechanic I forgot about rears its head. See, carnivores will go out of their way to attack and kill tranquilized dinosaurs, even if it's one they might not be able to hunt normally. So when I tranquilize the Dryosaurus, one of the Coelophysis made a beeline for it and killed it. So if you thought you weren't going to see any predation events this quickly, you'd be wrong, even if this one was totally my fault. But the species going into different environments phenomenon is spreading fast, as now one of the compies is off into the desert, which he'll quickly find out is a bad idea, as soon after he's hunted down and killed by another one of the Coelophysis. Oh, come on, how bad can your situational awareness be, dude? His corpse is right there! Well, another tuberculosis outbreak later. Yeah, I know, it's been so long since the last— Ow, you dick! I start working on the next species, and thank God I have a lot of genome modifications because this thing has a very good chance of being short-lived instead of long-lived. And I start sprucing up the grasslands since they'll be our first additions to this new environment. So after placing a few more outposts for appeal, I airlift in our new herd of Edmontosaurus. Edmontosaurus was one of the most prolific dinosaurs of late Cretaceous North America, surviving across the continent for millions of years. Two species are currently recognized, and the one represented in the game is most likely Edmontosaurus regalis, the earlier and slightly smaller of the two species. That's not to say that regalis was small, it's just to say that the other species, Edmontosaurus annectens, was absolutely enormous. This was the largest dinosaur in the Hell Creek Formation, even bigger than T-Rex, and throwing its massive weight around is likely how it was able to survive against such a predator. Some fossils show direct evidence of healed battle scars that T-Rex left on Edmontosaurus, so it didn't go down easy, and even the smaller regalis dwarfed the tyrannosaurs it was contemporary with. If only the games accurately reflected what an absolute tank of an animal this would have been. At least the design is gorgeous. I do need to touch up the grasslands now with a few trees to keep our new herd happy, and trying to do that while maintaining the grassland aesthetic is not that easy, let me tell ya. Though it seems like the Edmontosaurus may not be too jazzed about living in the grasslands to begin with, as it seems some of them are already taking off to the desert. I thought you guys just asked for trees, but whatever. Aw, scratchy baby. At the very least, the Ornithomimosaurs seem to be enjoying the grasslands. Probably lots of room to stretch those big chicken legs out there. But yeah, the Edmontosaurus have pretty quickly dropped this biome for the desert. By having absolutely no control over what these animals decide to do and nature taking its course despite my best efforts, this park already follows the themes of Jurassic Park better than pretty much all of its sequels. Something else I don't exactly have control over is lack of path space. See, this control center here is basically the hub for how guests access the Hyperloop system to get to all the outposts and see all the dinosaurs. And with the outpost being the best way to see everything in the entire park, this ends up being an extremely popular attraction, with a very crowded entrance that ends up bottlenecking my guest count. It's also siphoning away visitors from my other, less crowded attractions, especially in the desert. There is a solution to this problem, but it takes me a very long time to figure it out. For now, it's going to be very persistent. Unfortunately, we do already have our first death to old age in the park, but this was to be expected. About half my Dryosaurus batch were cloned before I could even guarantee the long-lived trait, so some of them didn't end up getting the trait. Luckily, they're relatively cheap to produce, so I don't have to worry about running out of them anytime soon. Thankfully, I've still got a good chunk of time left with the green gang, so that's comforting. I also managed to find a few more compies out in the wild, which is nice after, you know, one of them got eaten. I'm spending a lot of time waiting around for research, digs, and fossil extraction to complete, so getting some dinosaurs in through these wilder ports is a nice little bonus while I wait patiently for the more impressive species. Though the compies aren't exactly getting the chance to last all that long in the first place. How did you even get there that fast when you're so small? Well, even if the scavengers are picking each other apart, very frequently, at the very least I've managed to avoid any Stegosaur and Ceratopsian cross-contamination up until this point. That got ugly quite a few times in my last few attempts at this. Since I am getting dinosaurs that are getting more expensive to synthesize, I decided to upgrade my hatchery with a unit that basically guarantees all of your eggs will be good to go. To put it this way, after I installed this upgrade, I never once got a bad egg for the rest of this run. Would highly recommend. And I'll be needing to get as many eggs per batch as possible now that I'm adding some really big theropods to the grassland of the ecosystem. Last time Gigantoraptor might not have had the chance to do all that much, but believe me, they are going to be some extremely hectic characters this time around. There's two kinds of Oviraptorosaurs. There's the Oviraptorids, which are generally on the smaller side like their namesake Oviraptor. And then there's the Caenignathids, which were upsettingly large, like Gigantoraptor here. Oviraptorosaur taxonomy is honestly a bit of a headache even for the people who study this sort of thing for a living, so size is one of the easiest ways to determine if you've got a Caenignathid on your hands. Or more accurately, if one has you in theirs. Some of the smaller canignathids, like the North American Anzu, would pretty comfortably rest their chin on the top of your head, and then crack your skull open like an egg. But Oviraptorosaurs as a whole are well known for being devoted and caring parents of their nests. So rest assured knowing that your brainless corpse would go towards feeding the next generation of giant murder turkeys. Immediately after introducing our giant fluffy boys, one of the Dryosaurus gets displaced from its buddies, so I tranquilize it to get it back home, but all the Gigantoraptor sees is a free meal. I know it's from the Cretaceous Predators pack, but I didn't realize they would do that. Sorry, little Dryosaurus. I told you not to get attached. That's not the only predation event going on, as the Coelophysis are still eating up the little Compsognathus like they're french fries. I thought it was starting off with the most manageable meat eaters. I didn't realize it would go like this. Just imagine how bad it'll get once I put in some real big hunters. And hey, you see that Gigantoraptor eating from the meat feeder in the desert? Well, he decides he doesn't like being alone in the desert, and takes it out on the nearby fence and all of my guests. I try to take matters into my own hands, but apparently in my panic, I was shooting him with uppers instead of downers the whole time, so now I've got a coked up bloodthirsty gigaturkey on my hands. David Kep really couldn't come up with any ideas for dinosaurs in the modern world when a dinosaur version of Cocaine Bear was right there in front of him. In spite of everything, there is a silver lining to this, as apparently one of the guests who got trampled to death must have been Logan Paul or something, and people are just willing to give me money for their death. Sure, thanks. That'll help recoup all the losses from all the innocent people who died. Well, that was a bit too hectic and violent for my liking, so let's get this turkey back in his coop. Well, luckily, I'm a brilliant businessman, and I know that after an incident where a dinosaur brutally trampled dozens of people to death, what will bring asses back into seats is more dinosaurs. So on top of releasing another flock of Gallimimus and dealing with another tuberculosis outbreak, seriously, it's like the fucking Dark Ages in this goddamn park, I also get to airlifting in our park's newest species, our first sauropod, the Nigersaurus. Nigersaurus is, unsurprisingly, from the country of Niger. I've also heard it pronounced as Niger, but I live in America and we don't pronounce things fancy like here. Also, people like to act all aghast at its name all the time because it's close to a very naughty word, when like, it's literally named after a country. Do you faint every time you see a globe? Don't tell these people about Uruguay.
You are gay.
Anyway, these were relatively small by sauropod standards, and one of the most unique traits of Nigersaurus is their head. They had a very wide set mouth that's famous for containing up to 500 tiny teeth, which were replaced very frequently and would likely have been used to comb through plant matter. It lived in a somewhat swampy environment with other well-known African species like Suchomimus, Tyrannosaurus, and the giant crocodilomorph Sarcosuchus. So the fact that this game's rendition reminds me so much of a giant long-necked pygmy hippopotamus is very fitting. The Nigersaurus are a good addition, and after the placement of a few more trees, they're settling in nicely, but I'm looking to break the 2-star threshold soon so I can start working on the 6th area, and I'm hoping that this next sauropod species will be able to crack it. With a lot of the other biomes looking pretty full, I decide that it's time for our swamp to get its first real residence with a pair of giant Apatosaurus. Hope you like this background track, this is gonna be a long one. Apatosaurus is at the center of one of the biggest dinosaur controversies of all time. See, back in the early days of North American paleontology, there was a feud known as the Bone Wars between two rival paleontologists, Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope, both of whom we'll talk about more later. This was a not so friendly competition to basically see who was the best at finding and describing new types of fossils. And we are still feeling the ramifications of this war to this day, because these goobers would take any minute difference between fossils and instantly claim it's a new genus to get a leg up on their rival. One genus of small ornithopods, Nanosaurus, was previously known under no less than 5 different genus names, including Othnielia, Othnilosaurus, and Drinker. Guess who discovered that last one? That's right, Robert Bacher. So this is a similar situation that our friend Apatosaurus found itself in. Because when two genera are found out to be synonymous, the one that gets named first takes priority. And this was a problem because Apatosaurus was competing with a much more popular dinosaur name, one that's essentially synonymous with sauropods, Brontosaurus. So Brontosaurus was one of the many invalid genus names attributed to the absolute shit show that was the Bone Wars because it was deemed to be not distinct enough from Apatosaurus. But the name Brontosaurus stuck around for almost 100 years because it's quite frankly way cooler and more memorable. It's the thunder lizard. That's sick as hell. But then, in 2015, over a century after it was invalidated, re-examination of material of the species Apatosaurus excelsus revealed that crazy crackpot Marsh was actually onto something, and Brontosaurus was indeed found to be distinct enough from Apatosaurus to be its own genus again. This has left Apatosaurus a bit in the dust, as now the very closely related sauropod with the way cooler name is back, leaving Apatosaurus as not much more than a footnote in the very strange history of its much cooler named cousin. Like basically all of the big sauropods in this game, Apatosaurus has a very high forestation requirement, so even with how very obviously forested this area looks, I still need to add even more trees to it. Once they have so many trees I can barely even see them, they're satisfied, but a familiar fence broken notification makes my heart drop. It's once again a lonely Gigantoraptor separated from its friends in the desert, but thankfully I put a secondary fence outside of the main lair in case of this exact situation. In a real life dinosaur park, the inclusion of this extra fence layer probably would have been a tombstone legislation after the last escape, and you can bet your ass my company would have fought against it tooth and nail to save the couple of $1,000s I had to spend on new fences. It's like how car companies used to fight against including seatbelts because they slightly increased manufacturing costs. I once again need to bolster up my Dryosaurus population. I may as well have these things coming out of a conveyor belt at this point, and once again, it's path crowding that's my main issue, preventing me from upping my star rating. And while the entrance to the viewing outpost is still decently crowded, the results I get from freeing up so much space are almost instantaneous, and replacing a couple of my smaller amenities with medium-sized ones is all it takes to bump me up to 2 stars, unlocking everything I need for the final biome. Can you guess what it's gonna be? Yeah, of course you know I'm adding a lagoon section. I feel a bit bad after the last challenge didn't have any aviaries or lagoons in it, so I figured I'd add a beach biome that doubles as a guest area inside of the lagoon's barriers. Now the trick is to find multiple prehistoric species that will get along with each other. I have some ideas, but we'll see how they pan out. But before I can even think about that, one of the Gigantoraptor gets into a fight with one of our Chasmosaurus and kills it basically instantly. The poor little member of the Green Gang was well past his due date anyway, but holy shit, what a way to go. I don't even know why he left the forest. Maybe it wasn't to die, but to see if he was really alive. It seems peaceful enough in the grasslands after the Chasmosaurus' death, unless you're a car, I guess, then watch out for these hands. Feet, I guess. They're such assholes. At least the Nigersaurus don't cause any problems for anyone. They're nice. I get a clean million from an archaeological find on the construction site of my monorail trek to the lagoon guest area. All it costs is a bit of extra construction time, which is fine by me since this area is going to take a little while to get up and running anyway. I'm kind of running out of room to put anything new into my main guest area after putting in the monorail station and one last amenity, so I really should get the lagoon area open up soon though. I'm starting to get quite a few deaths at this point, but I don't think it's been going on quite long enough for a full-on death spiral. But the shorter-lived species are definitely needing to be replaced more frequently than I expected. At least the bodies are good food for the scavengers. One of my Dryosaurus has contracted a serious burn after bashing itself against the electric fence for leaving the forest that was specifically designed to cater to its needs because he's fucking stupid. Now I have to tranquilize him to take him to the vet while he's in the middle of Coelophysis territory. Luckily, he doesn't get mauled to death in his sleep, and after I send out a capture team, they manage to bring home another new species, even if they only caught one Moros intrepidus out of 9. Nice shooting, dorks. Not much is known from Moros intrepidus outside of a leg and a few teeth, but enough is known about it to know that this was a Tyrannosauroid from the beginning of the late Cretaceous. Because that sounds so much better than saying Middle Cretaceous. Science! It's a relatively recently discovered species, and its depiction in the game and movie it comes from is less than accurate. It was by no means a giant, but the leg that was found is longer than this depiction's entire body. This probably would have been one of the less impressive theropods of its time and region, sharing the spotlight with the famous Deinonychus and the contentiously placed theropod Shiats. I decided that since my Chasmosaurus are in their golden years and also getting randomly murdered by giant death turkeys, that it's high time to cook up another batch, and these ones thankfully aren't all green. I even find a few wild ones that further help bolster the population. I also make a new batch of Muttaburrasaurus as they're starting to wander off well outside of their desert origins, and I want to minimize the risk of one getting lonely and taking it out on my fences. At least they're not as bad as they were in the first game, 6 population minimum. Get out of here. But Muttaburrasaurus isn't the only Australian dinosaur I want to have in this ecosystem, And after a bit of waiting, we're ready to welcome our next new species into the swamp. Our herd of adorable Minmi. Okay, so this genus name is actually pronounced Minmi, but I say Minmi because it sounds cuter and fits this little goober so much better. Now this is a small ankylosaur from early Cretaceous Australia, though where it actually places within the ankylosaur family tree is uncertain. It could be a nodosaurid, a basal ankylosaurid, or too primitive to be considered definitively part of either group. Most reconstructions of Minmi come from a very closely related dinosaur from the same region named Cumbarasaurus, which is a much better preserved. In fact, Minmi almost went through a similar situation as Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus with Cumbarasaurus, but it was determined that these two were distinct, so they both get to keep their names. Which is good, because Minmi is too cute of a name to waste. The inclusion of our Minmi, who are born into this world riddled with tuberculosis because it's been so fun to deal with the last 7 times, are enough to finally bring our park up to the halfway mark of our challenge. 2.5 stars, which just so happens to be the rating I need to get the tuberculosis inoculation in the first place, so there you go. One of my contracts requires that I get a photo of a Moros eating, which is a lot higher than you would think for reasons we'll soon get to, so I get in a bunch of those too. Nothing bad will come of this decision. I'm bringing in a herd of Kentrosaurus I caught out in the wild and see a big spot where it says there's an incompatible species? That's weird, what's up with that? Well, it turns out what's up with that is that a bunch of Chasmosaurus have left the forest and gone into the desert where all the Kentrosaurus live. Okay, so that's bad. Ceratopsians and Stegosaurs do not get along at all in this game, so this could easily lead to fights to the death between the two. But they're not the only ones in danger. My compies are getting absolutely trashed by the nearby Coelophysis. I barely have any left at this point. At least the Moros are far enough away that they're not getting eaten. They have their own problems to worry about. After taking a bit of time to liven up the beach biome a bit, someone offers me $1.25 million for one Gallimimus egg, when this whole batch costs less than $500,000 to incubate. Sure, go for it. Hope you make a really good omelet or whatever you're gonna do with it. Yeah, it didn't take long, the Moros are starting to get sick. Okay, here's the problem with Moros Intrepidus in this game. They're small, but they're also slow. Unlike the compies who are small but zip around all over the place. Moros takes forever to get anywhere, and that means when they wander around, they might get so far away from a food or water source that they just end up dying, or end up so far away from the forest or sand they require that they end up getting sick. These things struggle to survive anywhere except for the most basic and curated environment. Even after I do my best to add as many trees as I can to the grasslands, one of them is already in the process of starving to death. I hate to say this, but Moros Intrepidus is kind of like the J-Pug Dryosaurus of this game. If you're playing outside of Sandbox and don't have them in a very small curated enclosure, I'm not sure they'll ever make it to old age. But they're not the only ones dealing with environmental problems, as I come over to find one of my Chasmosaurus has become what looks like the victim of gang violence. Jesus, how many of you guys did it take to bring down this poor bastard? This park is just running into a bunch of issues with sick dinosaurs, dying of old age, and it's getting to the point where it really starts to feel unmanageable. And hey, quick reminder, this is just hard mode and there's no storms. Just imagine what this would be like otherwise. For as attractive as it's apparently become to my dinosaurs, the desert is rapidly turning realistically hostile. This place should be a bone bed at this point. At least the Chasmosaurus are getting some wins, and the Coelophysis are getting some free meals, but this is just getting brutal. And to add on to the stress, even after putting in a new carnivore feeder for them, one of the Moros has still starved to death. I'll spare you the painful details and say that this species doesn't end up making it to the end of this ecosystem. I ended up releasing the survivors, but it took a few tiny fluffy bodies to realize that they were simply not built for these streets. Of course, all the fighting has led to injury and infection, so I have to go around and heal everyone before these assholes just go around and undo all my hard work anyway. Just go back home to the forest. It's gotten to the point where when I see one of my Chasmosaurus has died of old age, it's downright shocking. With the migration of just one species, this ecosystem has immediately turned into a royal rumble. I know everyone who likes giant theropods likes to imagine who would win in a fight between them, and I think this is what would happen if everyone who liked medium-sized herbivores argued about the same thing. I can't even heal the ones with major injuries because these giant fucking murder turkeys are literally sprinting from one body to the next to get their licks in. And then apparently apparently this guy's not done, so he goes and kicks another Kentrosaurus in the face for good measure just out of love of the game. I am so frustrated. Well, it's clearly time to add in some more Chasmosaurus since for some unexplainable reason they've suffered from a major population deficit. And speaking of population deficit, the Coelophysis have done a major number as we're now down to our final Compsognathus. This is the only one that's managed to avoid getting eaten. It's clear we're in need of some new blood, so I airlift in a herd of Maiasaura over to the swamps. Maiasaura was a hadrosaur from late Cretaceous North America, and this was a very important dinosaur when it was first discovered. As before then, the idea of dinosaurs actually being caring parents who looked after their eggs was largely unheard of. Oviraptor wasn't exonerated as an egg parent rather than an egg thief until the 1990s, so the existence of a dig site in the 70s that was filled with not only eggs, but juveniles too large to be hatchlings proved that at least some dinosaurs cared for their babies after they hatched, earning it the name of Good Mother Lizard. The trait of caring for offspring after they've hatched is one that's shared by all modern archosaurs. Even crocodilians take care of their babies after hatching. Look at this Gary old dad with all his babies. Ain't that sweet? I think we're just about past everyone acting like this is the goddamn Thunderdome, so I'm putting most of my attention into getting started on populating our beach, which is taking a lot of very expensive expeditions and a lot longer than I was expecting. It's comforting to go out into the ecosystem for just a short while and see peace without a billion notifications popping up in my face. I mean, okay, these two are taking turns kicking the shit out of each other, but we already knew they were jerks. A somewhat unexpected new addition to the park comes in the form of a herd of wild-caught Tyrannosaurus. Hopefully they'll pay their Nigersaurus contemporaries a visit every now and then, but for now, they'll live in the swamp, which is really starting to fill out now. Tyrannosaurus is a strange dinosaur for multiple reasons. For one thing, where it places in regards to other ornithopods taxonomically hasn't been especially clear. It was originally thought to be an iguanodontian, but now it's believed to be more of a basal hadrosaur. But the main thing that sticks out about Tyrannosaurus, quite literally, is the giant bony structure on its back, which has left scientists stumped for decades now. Sail-like structures are nothing new to paleontology and even some modern-day reptiles, but they're otherwise unheard of in ornithopods, and its association with spinosaurs like Suchomimus, whose relatives also specced into the whole sailback thing, makes you wonder what was going on in early Cretaceous Africa. As of right now, it's still unclear what the function or even form of this structure was, and in fact, the game portrays both current hypotheses in its two models, with the frontier design showing it as more of a bison-like hump structure, while the Camp Cretaceous model shows it as more of a traditional sail. At this point, the only barren biomes are the beach and the mountains. I don't want to fill the other ones up too much, or else I might run into issues with cohabitation. Even too many neutral species packed together can be pretty bad, as you'll soon see. Though I may not have to worry about that in the swamp, since it looks like the Maiasaura prefer the grasslands. I just can't predict what any of these species will do. Unfortunately, one thing is predictable, and that's that our final compy did not end up dying of old age. It seems there's only room for one scavenger in this ecosystem, and we've now lost two species with the compies and Moros. Speaking of unpredictability, what are you doing over by that fence, Mr. Edmontosaurus? Oh my god! Yeah, I guess he was feeling a bit lonely in this particular part of the desert, and now that guy is just straight up dead. Want to see how far away he was from his friends? There they are. Yeah. Oh, territories in this game sometimes. Oh boy, speaking of territory issues, look who came over to cause problems for my newest batch of Chasmosaurus. Dude's on a freaking kill streak, can you chill? Why are you all like this? I ended up needing to cook up a batch of both of the trouble children of this run. Okay, I say that, but let's be real, everyone has given me some kind of problem. Well, okay, maybe not the Nitrosaurus, they're alright. And the swamp guys. The worst the Apatosaurus has done is ask me for more trees. Why don't we add a bit more unpredictability into the mix? I've double checked what ceratopsian species will get along with Chasmosaurus, and that's given me a great opportunity to add my favorite one in the game, the Styracosaurus. Styracosaurus is a fascinating ceratopsian. It has a large display of several horns jutting out of its frill that not only look intimidating, but also may have served to help each member of the species identify individuals. Each horn ornamentation among Styracosaurus specimens is very unique, and this has led to some confusion over the years, with one specimen being given a different genus name in Rubeosaurus, before scientists realized that it was really just a very unique looking Styracosaurus. Not only were they diverse, but some Styracosaurus horn ornamentations were even asymmetrical, with different shapes and even different numbers of horns varying from individual to individual. This sort of thing is pretty rare for bilateral organisms, so it's very interesting to see displayed in Styracosaurus, even if all the models in the game look the same. Well, they're doing alright in the forest, but as I'm about to get started working on finally populating the lagoon, all of a sudden, one of the Gigantoraptor, you guessed it, gets separated from his buddies, gets lonely, and finds the one point of weakness in this entire fence and breaks through it so we can squish my guests under his feet like fresh summer raspberries. I try my hardest to block off his path to my guests, but it doesn't work, and he squished them like a bug. Please stay in your corner from now on. Can we please be cool now? No! Here comes a lonely Muttaburrasaurus to bash his face against my fence so hard it cooks his flesh off, and a lonely Maiasaurus sure to do the same thing. Cross that species off the list of ones that haven't pissed me off yet. You started in the swamp, how did you even get here? Whatever, after all that headache-inducing crap, it's finally time to introduce our first lagoon species. And while it may not be my favorite, I'm sure our guests will be very happy to meet our new Elasmosaurus. Hey kids, it's time for more wacky misadventures with our good friends Marsh and Cope. So Elasmosaurus was not a dinosaur, but a very large plesiosaur from the inland sea of late Cretaceous North America, described by Cope, who was correctly able to identify it as such. However, when reconstructing the animal, Cope gave it a short neck and a long tail, putting the head on the wrong end of the body, much to the eternal amusement of Marsh, who humiliated Cope by pointing out this mistake. And he never let that shit go. He rode Cope's ass about it for decades. And then Marsh rubbed salt in the wound by pretty thoroughly trouncing Cope in the Bone Wars mentioned earlier. If you're starting to feel bad for Cope at this point, don't worry, he was a eugenicist. Again, these two were not friendly rivals. They hated each other's guts so hard that if an anime were made about them today, literally everyone would ship them. Elasmosaurus was just one of many animals caught in their crossfires. With our first lagoon species in place, now the issue I'm going to be running into here is that I want to have sort of a mini ecosystem of marine animals that all get along with each other. So I have to figure out what's going to fit in best with our new long-necked swimmy boys. For now though, managing my stupid ass dinosaurs who keep wandering off from their group and getting lonely is more than enough to keep me occupied. It would be so nice if they just knew their way back home, but they just forget it. They're stupid. They're so stupid. Oh boy, speaking of stupid, it's a new take on an old classic. At least no one died yet. What the flip? Dude, could you guys not be assholes for like 2 seconds? That's it. Everyone in this ecosystem is really starting to piss me off. It's time to introduce a predator. Oh man, introducing a predator is expensive. Do I have to? Oh well, I guess the government must have heard me because they just want to give me $500,000 and keep doing what I'm doing. I never thought I'd say this, but thanks, the government. Well, I'm accomplishing a lot of things at once here, because I want to introduce a serious predator into this ecosystem, which I finally have enough money to make. I want to do it in the mountains so they'll finally be populated, and I have a contract I need done that wants me to build a tour ride. So I build one over to the mountains where I'll be putting my new predator. Huh, I guess it was cannibalistic after all. But after a quick airlift, they finally arrive. A pack of 4 beautiful Cryolophosaurus. Oh, you stupid son of a bitch. Cryolophosaurus is one of the most noteworthy dinosaurs of the early Jurassic. For one thing, this was one of, if not the biggest known predatory dinosaurs from the time period, likely over 20 feet long and half a ton. For another thing, this is one of the few dinosaur species that's known from the continent of Antarctica. I'm gonna be real, I don't have the slightest clue of how Antarctic paleontology even works. Like, how the hell do people get the idea to go digging for fossils in this? But when it works because they found a crazy one with this, and named it appropriately, the frozen crested lizard, after the prominent display structure on the animal's head that's also given it the nickname Elvisaurus due to its resemblance to a pompadour. I'm sure if this dinosaur was described after the JoJo anime came out, it would have a different nickname. Even though they're the first species being added to the mountains, one adventurous Tyrannosaurus has already wandered dangerously close to their domain. This could prove dangerous, but the pack seems content to stay in their new mountainous home for the time being. They have all the food they need here, so hopefully they won't feel the need to start enacting population control measures just yet. Let's also hope they don't feel the same way about our guests too. But Cryolophosaurus isn't the only predator being added. We've got a new aquatic hunter coming to the lagoons with the addition of Nothosaurus. Nothosaurus is a genus of aquatic reptiles from the middle to late Triassic period, and they were extremely prolific, with at least 12 species being known from across Europe, the Middle East, and China. The Triassic was kind of a crazy time for marine reptiles, just sort of going insane and doing whatever the hell they wanted, but Nothosaurus was pretty standard, resembling something of a long-necked aquatic lizard with webbed feet, though they're not very closely related to lizards at all. And from these humble 10-foot-long beginnings would eventually come the plesiosaurs, as Nothosaurus represents one of the earlier members of the Sauropterygian family tree. Unlike their later descendants, fossil pathways show that Nothosaurus was likely semi-aquatic, being able to come out onto land as well as being at home in the sea, much like modern day seals and sea lions. I've got more ambitious ideas for this lagoon coming up shortly, but for now I have to deal with just more of the same. Lonely dinosaurs separated from the group, bashing their heads against one particular fence. This is getting so old. At the very least, hunting deaths and injuries aren't something I have to worry about. The Cryolophosaurus bros seem to be content with hunting goats for the time being. It does look fun. And what's more fun is adding yet another new species to the lagoons. And I think Shonisaurus will get along with everyone else just fine. Like I said, the Triassic was a time for everyone to get weird and experimental, and ichthyosaurs collectively decided that they wanted to be whales. Giant ichthyosaurs like Shonisaurus and its relatives Shastosaurus and Ichthyotitan were the largest aquatic animals to have existed until the evolution of whales. These creatures were enormous, with Shonisaurus reaching nearly 70 feet in length and weighing almost 90 tons. And some of its relatives may have gotten even bigger than that. And the crazy thing is, these were relatively early ichthyosaurs. Ichthyosaurs showed up in the early Triassic, and halfway through decided to go all Andrew Dobson and inflate into sea blimps. It's likely that these may have hunted large prey, so even though their giant dolphin-like appearance makes them look cute, you'd be wise to be cautious around these giants. Some of the Maiasaur are getting lonely around the desert area's fence and it's making me anxious, so I just synthesized some new friends for them. Imagine if life worked that way. So many dinosaurs are wandering into the desert where I've placed none of their required food, so they end up going hungry and I have to place more food in there, which makes this desert look decidedly less deserty than I originally intended. I think soon enough every single biome will just look like the forest. I'm having a problem here because my current contract says I need to keep my animals disease free for 5 minutes, but the counter isn't going down, and I'm not getting any notifications for disease. It has to be in the lagoon since I don't have a team assigned to do checkups on them. And after mourning the loss of all 3 of our favorite murder turkey menaces, one of whom we watched straight up drop dead to the ground, which is just horrible, and seeing some more interspecies combat, I'm very surprised you lived that. My suspicions on what's going on in the lagoon are confirmed when I realize that my Nothosaurus are being crowded and stressed out by too many neutral species in the lagoons. Apparently everything is neutral to them, so this is a species best kept with its own kind. At least I know that for the future, but for now, this is once again a species that I just have to remove for being incompatible with this ecosystem. Don't worry, I'll find something else to use those rock platforms. However, I'm still having problems with path crowding in guest areas outside of the main one running at a loss. So I make a tough decision and get rid of a lot of my viewing outposts so the guests need to use the other facilities in order to see dinosaurs. This is a huge gamble, but one that could potentially result in me seeing huge increases in other guest facility profits instead of bottlenecking me in one area. My appeal has understandably taken a major hit, but I have enough funds saved up to hopefully get the facilities I need to get it back up to a reasonable level. A large hotel here, a viewing platform there, and a Cryolophosaurus hunting and killing one of the Tyrannosaurus. Wait, that's not an attraction. Since the lagoon will have the highest concentration of appeal in a small area, I do my best to get as much of the area filled in as I can with what limited space I have. I also make sure to put up a handful of outposts in areas where it's hard to get regular visibility otherwise. I still want the appeal after all. And it looks like after all that, I'm at least back to where I was before, just hopefully with less guest crowding issues. Though building crowding is another story. Damn, that's a tight squeeze. And I think it worked. My facilities outside of the main hub are actually making a solid profit for once, so it seems like my gamble paid off. I do still need a bit of extra money for my next projects, so I need to get some pictures of and just like that, we have enough money to incubate a pair of beautiful Archelon for our lagoon. These are the species I knew I had to get for this park, since they have a pretty great appeal rating, and they get along with every lagoon species in the game. Even the big predators won't hunt them. Archelon was a giant sea turtle. That sounds like it should go without saying, because look at it, but there's a lot of things out there that will try their hardest to convince you they're turtles. Like I said, the Triassic was weird. Anyway, Archelon was likely the biggest turtle that's ever lived, being up to 15 feet long and weighing 3 tons. By comparison, the largest turtle today is the leatherback sea turtle, which is about 8 feet long and half a ton at best. Much like modern day leatherbacks, Archelon would have had a similar leathery shell as opposed to the harder shell seen on other turtles like green sea turtles. Despite this resemblance, they're largely unrelated to modern day sea turtles and are a part of their own separate lineage called protostegids, which lasted throughout the Cretaceous and would have been hunted by the many horrifying things that lived in the world's oceans at that time. They were contemporary with Elasmosaurus though, so hopefully these guys will get along great together. Well, a couple of pictures later and I've almost made up for what I spent incubating these things, so I'm pretty sure this was a worthwhile business venture. Big turtles sell, kids. I guess that's why those pizza-eating hooligans are so popular. I used that well-earned turtle money to revitalize some of my older populations that are dying off. I've thankfully already replaced the Gigantoraptors, but the Minmi and Nigersaurus are in need of replacing too. I'm in the middle of replacing an assload of species when I get a huge offer from some black market goons. $15 million in exchange for my animal with the highest appeal. Holy shit. Well, that would have to be my Archelon, and I just spent $2 million getting both of those guys. So, yeah, this is a horrible deal for you guys, but thanks for the money. Enjoy the turtle soup or whatever the hell you'll do with him. Maybe this is where all the dinosaurs from the black market run came from. I bet it's even the same goons.
Hey, Tony, we got that big turtle you wanted.
Hey, bada bing, boys, just what the boss wanted to see. So, you paid the sucker, right? Uh-huh, we sure did, boss. 1.5 million, just like you said.
1.5? 1.5? Let me see that. You spent $15 million on a turtle? That does it. This turtle ain't the only one sleeping with the fishes tonight.
But then as I'm placing down a new lagoon hatchery, I get to sell an endangered species on the site for another $2 million. Man, these black market guys love buying animals off of me.
$2 million on a what?
So I'm at liberty to go on a full-on spending spree here, revitalizing my populations, getting new genomes, cooking up a new, even bigger batch of Archelon for a fraction of the price I sold just one for, and using those new turtle boys to make even more money off the pictures I take of them. The Archelon photo meta is back! We managed to make it to 3.5 stars, which unlocks a lot of species that are way too expensive to research even with all the money I just made. Seriously, these prices are not balanced for challenge mode. We also see another Cryolophosaurus hunting event, and like, I'm gonna be honest, this one was just natural selection. He did not react anywhere near fast enough. Right now, I've got my sights set on a couple of sauropods who will get along with Apatosaurus in the swamp, so I send out some dig teams, and make a couple more Apatosaurus just in case the ones I already have crap out on me. And I finish a nice easy photo contract so I can get a little bit of extra. Are you fucking kidding me? Oh, and I'm just barely able to stop another one of these stupid turkeys from running in and causing even more mayhem. This may be a new generation of Gigantoraptors, but they carry on the first generation's tradition of wreaking havoc and pissing me off. Look at him sitting all cute like a dog who just tore up the trash, except it's next to the dead body he just killed. Oh yeah, and my attempts to stop the other one from breaking in didn't last long, by the way. I have no idea what is wrong with these creatures, but I'm considering selling them to the black market goons for Thanksgiving. Well, I take the time to reinforce the fences since everyone's holed up in the damn bunkers anyway, and I see that the issue the Gigantoraptor were having was with cohabitation, so one of them decides to take matters into his own hands. Feet, I guess. Ouch. Well, I get started on the first of our new sauropod species, and thankfully with no further incidents to speak of, we transfer our pair of Brachiosaurus in with their sauropod buddies into the swamps. Brachiosaurus was a huge sauropod from late Jurassic North America, specifically in the Morrison Formation where it shared its habitat with dinosaurs like Apatosaurus, Allosaurus, and Stegosaurus. Its distinctive head shape is actually something that's not known from Brachiosaurus itself. A close African relative of Brachiosaurus, Giraffatitan, was actually classified under the Brachiosaurus name for several years. You can even see this in JPOG. One of the locations you can get Brachiosaurus fossils from is in Africa. A complete skull of Brachiosaurus has never been found, but Giraffatitan's has been. And in fact, Giraffatitan is known for much more complete material overall than its more famous North American cousin. So just know that anytime you're looking at a Brachiosaurus, you're probably really looking at a Giraffatitan. After releasing a few more Edmontosaurus for a contract, I transfer in what may be an unexpected new species, the hybrid Ankylodocus. And if he's anything like his Brachiosaurus and Apatosaurus roommates, he's gonna need a lot more trees than this. Ankylodocus, does not exist. It's a fictional animal, a made-up hybrid for the games. But that doesn't mean there's nothing interesting to talk about here. Superficially, Ankylodocus shares some traits with existing sauropods. For example, the bony plates on its back resemble the osteoderms found in some real-life sauropods like Saltosaurus, a relatively small sauropod from South America. The club on the end of its tail is also true to life to some sauropods, most famously Shunosaurus, another relatively small, somewhat basal sauropod from late Jurassic China. It's also believed that some other Chinese sauropods like Omesaurus and Mamenchisaurus also possess similar club tails. Ankylodocus and all the other hybrids in the game are also capable of having the Lux pattern, a skin pattern that gives them bioluminescent colors in the dark. This is based off of a real-life example of genetic bioengineering, with the most famous example being glowfish. These are normal fish that are essentially implanted with an isolated gene found in some jellyfish that causes them to glow with bright bioluminescent colors. Now, speaking personally as a fish keeper, but as part of a series that has a lot to do with genetic engineering, I think the idea of designer glowing dinosaurs fits in pretty well. It may seem weird adding a hybrid to a natural ecosystem like this, but I wanted a big group of mixed sauropod species together, and all three of these species get along with each other, which is not common for sauropods in this game. Besides, I'm already having to constantly intervene with nature whenever it decides to wander away from its friends or get a random outbreak of disease. What's a little more meddling with nature by creating unholy abominations against God? They'll probably still be more well behaved than the goddamn Gigantoraptors. But oh man, if you thought the Gigantoraptors were troublemakers, just you wait, because we're introducing another real deal predator into the ecosystem. And not just one, but a whole pack of them. Welcome to the park, my favorite dinosaur design in the game, the Utyrannus. When Utyrannus was first described back in 2012, it shook the earth, and the ramifications of its discovery are still being felt to this day. This is an early Cretaceous tyrannosauroid from China, and it's currently the largest dinosaur known with directly preserved fossil evidence of feathers. Other larger species are often depicted with feathers due to a process known as phylogenetic bracketing. Put simply, the idea that certain traits or features, in this case feathers, are ancestral to a group of mammals, and so would carry over to their descendants in some capacity. Hair on mammals is another example. All mammals have hair to some degree. Even the ones you would think don't, like your dad. The idea of more derived tyrannosaurs with feathers was floated around for a while, but absolutely skyrocketed with the discovery of Utyrannus, and people ran with it so hard that the idea of a T-Rex that was as fluffy as an emu may as well have been as good as scientific fact. Now though, evidence of skin impressions from T-Rex and its close relatives show that as tyrannosaurs got bigger, it seems as though they lost a lot of their fuzz, and now depictions of large feathered tyrannosaurs are much more conservative. Some depictions are full-on scaly, while others are more sparse, but while the jury is still out with T-Rex, Utyrannus is unquestionably deserving of its name, the Feathered Tyrant. I've put plum, avocado, grape, kiwi, and coconut here on the outskirts of the beach area to hopefully keep them from wandering off too far into the territories of other dinosaurs. I don't want them totally wiping out my herbivore populations or picking fights with the Cryolophosaurus, but I would soon find that my efforts were in vain. Their inclusion is enough to bring our appeal so high that we reach 4 stars, finally bringing us one step closer to our goal. For the time being, the fluffy tyrants aren't causing problems, they're only picking fights with each other over dominance. But just wait until they get hungry. Yeah, see, we didn't have to wait long. Plum's already hungry. I do hatch some Struthiomimus for them to eat, but based on this first kill, I should have figured they'd be setting their sights a bit bigger. The herbivores aren't the only ones drawing blood today, as Kiwi has decided to not only fight a Chasmosaurus to the death, but also kill a nearby Dryosaurus just for the love of the game. It's good to see that the same problem I was running to in my last attempt still persists. The bloodbath doesn't end there, as now it's Avocado's turn to instantly kill a Styracosaurus. I guess the blood feud between Tyrannosaurs and Ceratopsians runs deeper than I realized. For as much as I tried to isolate them, the Utyrannus pack has quickly taken over the forest and made it their own. I don't think he's supposed to be stuck like that. Well, I was right to be worried about the age of my Apatosaurus, as one of them has finally died of old age. Don't worry, I have some big plans on how to make up for their lost appeal in the swamp. A quick glance over to the forest after Kiwi gets another kill shows it to be an absolute graveyard. You'd think just getting one kill would keep all of these guys fed, but no, not really. Seriously, look at this. This is just a couple minutes later. Utyrannus clearly have a point to prove about feathered dinosaurs not being threatening. Probably to Gareth Edwards. Oh wow, so you guys do know what a meat feeder is. That's awesome. So clearly carnivores are doing great in this ecosystem. Let's add another one. Welcome to the family, Spinosaurus. Please try not to eat everyone in your new family, and use the fish feeders I gave you for God's sake. Oh, thank you. Spinosaurus may have a more storied history than any other single dinosaur genus outside of those in the Crystal Palace. When its fossils were first discovered in Egypt, it was originally thought of as nothing too crazy outside of the large neural spines for which it was named, and a lot of depictions of it were basically of a large Allosaurus with a sail. However, no one would ever get the chance to take a closer look at those initial fossils, as they were destroyed when the museum in Berlin they were being kept in was absolutely obliterated in an Allied bombing raid in World War II. Some new material of Spinosaurus was found over the years, with one jawbone in particular giving us a new idea of what the animal looked like, with a long crocodile-like snout like its cousins Baryonyx and Suchomimus. And it was re-evaluated as being an absolute monster that was bigger than T-Rex and even meaner. But after this one scene ruined discourse on large theropods from now until the end of time, everyone took a step back and realized that Spinosaurus was much more at home in the water, especially after looking at its close relatives who seemed to be adapted to eating fish. And this was solidified when brand new Spinosaurus material was found that utterly changed the way everyone viewed the animal. Twice. From an Allosaurus with a sail, to a crocodile-faced terror, to a giant shorebird, to a knuckle-walking behemoth, to a paddle-tailed sailback aquatic specialist. Our understanding of Spinosaurus has changed more dramatically than any other in recent memory, with maybe one exception. My ceratopsian populations are looking pretty dire, so I unsurprisingly have to invest a lot of time, effort, and money into bringing them back up to where they were. Of course, as soon as I do that, the fruit boys are more than happy to bring me right back down to square one. Yeah, they ran out of shit to eat in the forest, now they're making themselves the desert's problem. I'm working on fixing up the park's infrastructure when I get a notification for my tour being disabled. This is actually surprisingly the first time this has happened in this entire run, but boy are there some serious consequences to it happening. See, the Spinosaurus is the one who attacked a tour vehicle, but he seriously injured himself in the process, and now he's suffering from internal bleeding. And the worst part is, I can't just tranquilize him and get him to the vet because I don't have the right dart level. And getting that dart level is going to take a lot of time and even more money. But I've already sunk millions into getting the Spinosaurus. I am not gonna let him die just because he was a dingus who picked a fight with a car and lost. Your ancestors are looking down on you in shame. One of those things took down a freaking airplane. Looks like it's once again time for Archelon photo shoots to the rescue. Seriously, I get more from one of these photos than some contracts I've done. But of course it can't be that simple, as now one of my Elasmosaurus has died of old age, meaning that's next on the replacement block, so now I have to worry about everything with the Spinosaurus, as well as getting a new batch of long-necked swimmy boys. Oh, not an Utica, no, it's an Albany dinosaur. Spino takes out his frustrations on an Edmontosaurus, and I realize I might need to take out my frustrations on one soon too, as the final tranquilizer level will cost me $3 million. This is not made any easier by the fact that the Utyrannus' tirade is starting to catch up with them. Treating Plum for a concussion he got in a fight isn't going to be cheap, and I can't tell if Grape is doing more damage to the Kentrosaurus or the tour truck here. Watch the paint job. I'm just pumping the Spinosaurus full of as much adrenaline as humanly possible to keep his body moving while I wait for more money to come in. It's not sustainable, but it's keeping him breathing. Cha, 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 cha. Yeah! On the bright side, the desert amenities are finally profitable, so that's nice. Gotta take the small victories where I can find them. But then a contract finally comes through that gets me well over $1 million, which is exactly what I need to research that last tranquilizer level. Now I can focus on getting my populations back up, which is good because I'm starting to run out of Tyrannosaurus. Once the research is done, we barely save our Spino from the brink of death and get set to capture him as I get a notification for a herd of Pachycephalosaurus available for capture. You know what? Sure, I could use the new species and the mountains are looking pretty barren. Before they arrive though, I need to treat the Spinosaurus and find out that just treating him will cost over $1 million. To recap, I am about $5 million deep into just treating the Spinosaurus' injury, when he already cost me several $1 million in research, excavations, and incubations just to get in the first place. But at least we get to welcome in a new species with the arrival of our Pachycephalosaurus. Pachycephalosaurus is the only Pachycephalosaurus that we know for absolute certain is Pachycephalosaurus. Specifically, this is Pachycephalosaurus wyomingensis, the largest known of all pachycephalosaurs. While these were big animals by modern day standards, it's not the biggest claim to fame. Their marginocephalian relatives in the ceratopsian family could get as big as elephants. Pachycephalosaurus was likely around 15 feet long and under half a ton. That's about the same size as a modern day Nile crocodile. This dinosaur is most famous for its thick domed skull, for which it gets its name of thick-headed lizard, and fossil evidence of lesions and scar marks on the skulls shows that they were using these thick heads like big-horned sheep, ramming them into one another for the purposes of ritualistic combat. Not having much room for a brain in that thick head, it's likely they would have charged at anything they didn't care to look at. After that, we get a few pictures to bump up our funds up just enough to finally treat the Spinosaurus and get him back into shape. All this because he bumped into a car. Now I can focus on the feathery menaces decimating my populations and trying desperately to get back to a point of sustainability. And speaking of decimated populations, easily my least problematic carnivores, the Cryolophosaurus, are starting to reach the end of their lives. The only problem with them is how goddamn expensive they are to make more of. I have a lot of very expensive species to replace, and quite frankly, I was worried that the run would end here. That business with the Spinosaurus getting wounded just ate into my finances when I really desperately needed more money. This is what real life is like. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get any worse, they got worse. Because of course one of the Utyrannus breaks through the fence into the desert area and starts trampling over all my guests. Just when this area became profitable too. He leaves on his own as soon as he runs out of people to eat, but legal fees are just about the last thing I needed right now. It's thankfully not that big of an incident, surprisingly. I'm not even sure if anyone got eaten, so I'm able to work on building up some more money for my population needs. Surprisingly, amidst all the chaos, I've neglected to perfectly optimize my amenities, so I have been missing out on some extra earnings. Our final surviving Cryolophosaurus does manage to get in one last hunt in his old age, but I can hardly complain about that at this point. He's earned it as far as I'm concerned. These guys were practically angels compared to my other meat eaters. Speaking of which, after getting some photos, there's a full-on cockfight going on between Grape and one of the Gigantoraptors, and Grape wins pretty handily. I think it's safe to say that turkeys have been dethroned as our resident problem children. Look at the one in the background running away. He wants nothing to do with this. Well, the Utyrannus are certainly trying to prove they're worthy of notoriety by once again breaking one of my fences and wreaking havoc among my guests, this time in the much more populated main hub. Apparently, these fuckers are just determined to find every single fence I didn't replace with heavy-duty reinforced steel and make sure I know about it. Thank you, Utyrannus, but next time I'll hire a contractor. However, luck is on our side once again, as it seems like now this time we managed to get Jake Paul killed at our park. So hey, I won't say no to $2.5 million. So after Grape just straight up eats someone, his reign of terror finally comes to an end, and with hopefully no more weak fences around the park, we've seen the last of these breakouts. Oh, me and my big fucking mouth. Well, if you've been dying for an herbivore action scene in this franchise, here you go. Also, apparently my Apatosaurus are starving to death while being surrounded by food. Free will was a fucking mistake. Either that or I guess Rebirth was right all along. At the very least, the deaths of the Paul brothers are enough to fund the return of Cryolophosaurus to our park. Let's hope they're as well behaved as the last batch. Oh yeah, no, that's fine, Avocado. Those barely cost anything to make. It's fine. It's great, actually. The Gigantoraptor are clearly trying to get some of their street cred back too, but killing a Chasmosaurus is played out by this point. Even the Kentrosaurus have been doing that, buddy. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, depending on how you feel about its grody-ass monster face, our last Elasmosaurus has died of old age. But not much time later, I've already got another batch of the things ready to go. Well, one life enters, another leaves. Or 2 lives, I fucking guess. Our star rating is getting there, and we've almost cracked the species number threshold. I'm just trying to earn as much money as I can for our next species, since it's gonna be a big one. Well, not Brachiosaurus big, but still big. Unfortunately, the species threshold will have to wait because we just lost both of our Shonisaurus at the same time. I didn't even get a warning. But after a particularly lucky fossil hunting expedition, I get enough cash to finally incubate a batch of Dinosaurs, who I release out into the forest. Hopefully the Utyrannus will think twice about coming in here now. While there's a lot less steps in the story of Dinosaurs, this is another example of a dinosaur where our perception of it has changed dramatically thanks to recent findings. Since its discovery in 1970, the only evidence found of Dinosaurs was a pair of arms. A pair of massive, long, utterly preposterous arms that were impossible to attribute to any known theropod body plan. Look how tiny they make this lady look, oh my god. I remember reading old dinosaur books that mentioned Dinosaurs, and all that they could say is that it was a total mystery, but it was definitely a theropod. Some theorize that it may have been a giant ornithomimid, and they weren't that far off. In 2014, the discovery of new specimens was revealed to the world, and it painted a completely different picture than anyone was expecting. It had a long, giant, toothless beak, it had a bizarre humpback, and it was huge. This dinosaur was almost as big as T-Rex, but it was completely unlike any other theropod known, being this completely crazy offshoot of ornithomimosaurs. And apparently, based on stomach contents found, it was also a fish eater, at least partially. The enormous duck-billed, humpbacked plant and fish-eating ornithomimosaur who could easily kill you with one swipe from its aptly named terrible hands. What an amazing creature. Our old problem of guest overcrowding is rearing its head again, but in hindsight, I shouldn't be too surprised with this being the only entrance to the tour ride in this sector. Maybe if I added a second one or expanded the monorail line, this wouldn't be so bad. Oh well, hindsight. I only managed to get one Shonisaurus incubated, but it's at least enough to get the species back in our park and finally cross the 25 species threshold. Now there's no more appeal penalty, we just have to worry about making enough money at this point. And making sure the ducks and the turkeys get along. Boy, power creep is a bitch. I don't think anyone knows that better than our poor ceratopsian friends, as it's once again time to revitalize the populations of both Styracosaurus and Chasmosaurus before both of these species go extinct in our park. With money my primary concern, I make absolutely sure my amenities are all as good as they're gonna get. And now my main priority is injecting as much appeal into my park as possible so people will use those venues. Better buy those Dinosaurus plushies fast. I hear it's an arms race out there. Part of that appeal process is getting some new Minmi out there. They're all dying up on me. And while my hopes were that the Dinosaurus would deter the Utyrannus from the forest, the reality is that the two feathered bipeds have sworn a blood oath to exterminate all the ceratopsians I just spent so much goddamn money on. It's all so tiresome. Well, after airlifting the Minmi to their new swampy home and adding in some of the Dinosaurus' less horrifying cousins, I decide that these living arrangements just aren't gonna cut it anymore and have the Dinosaurus moved over to the grasslands where they won't suffer from so many cohabitation issues, so they'll stop smashing their giant fluffy bodies against my fences. I also add in a new batch of compies since we could use the extra species, and for how little they cost to make, they're at least a decent amount of appeal in a high traffic area. And of course, right on cue, a Coelophysis materializes in the middle of the forest just to kill one as soon as they're born. I guess you missed the taste, huh? Meanwhile, over in the mountains, for the first time, the two species who live here full time actually interact with one another, and one of the Cryolophosaurus hunts down a Pachycephalosaurus. I really underutilized the mountains, but with them being home to a pack of deadly carnivores, it's probably a good thing I did. We've seen what happens when we don't isolate hungry meat eaters, haven't we, Avocado? Yep, there goes another one. I somehow have plenty of money saved up, which gives me more than enough to incubate a fairly reasonably sized clutch of Archelon eggs, and as soon as I release them, I see the single fastest increase in park popularity at this stage of the game I think I've ever seen. Ready? We're at 4.6 stars, the Archelon are just getting established, and that took less than a minute. Getting 5 stars seriously snuck up on me. I thought it'd be at this for a lot longer. Archelon is the freaking meta, man, I'm telling ya. This turtle wins the gold star for carrying multiple parks at this point. So, that's it. We finally actually reached 5 stars, even with as many concessions as this run required. I'm serious when I say that I want to see the people who are absolute pros at this game beat this challenge under the same stipulations on Jurassic difficulty with storms on. I would prefer to look like a complete idiot for missing out on a totally obvious solution, as opposed to conceding that I wasted my time and my original goal was impossible from the start. For everyone else, I'd seriously recommend lowering the difficulty settings even more if you want to try this challenge for yourself. Maybe not the species count, since I think having as many different species as possible is part of the fun, but in terms of the economy, yeah, go ahead and make life easy on yourself. You'll be able to get more dinosaurs out more frequently, and frankly get access to more species. Now, there were some dinosaurs I would have loved to have, but it just wasn't practical to spend $7.5 million on research alone. So it's possible to get 5 stars under these conditions, but is this really a functional ecosystem? Hell no! The Utyrannus pack alone proves that. These guys were an absolute menace to society through and through, though most of the other carnivores like the Cryolophosaurus and even the Spinosaurus were surprisingly well behaved, so I don't know, maybe the Utyrannus are just especially vicious. I guess I should expect as much from my favorite design in the game. But even without those bastards, let's be real, these dinosaurs can't function on their own without human intervention. John Hammond was wrong at the end of The Lost World. The last thing these creatures need is our absence. They need flat out intervention to stop wandering away from their friends and getting pissed off about it. Or at the very least, they need to stop taking out on my goddamn fences. Maybe this challenge would be easier with dinosaurs that straight up have no population requirements, but that's hindsight for you. In any case, that's easily the longest and hardest challenge run of this game I've done so far. I've got plenty more in the tank though, so stick around. Maybe we'll find a way to top this one. Ugh.